Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 forward. Joining me now on CFL Talk is David Morassutti.
Do you need a breath? There we go. Thank you, Frank.
I think just like the CFLPA, I need to take a breath.
It's gone from, we're hearing stuff, and then woo, it's almost like we're not at the boiling point yet. We're starting to see the fizzling. The water's starting to get a little hot. The steam's starting to build about the form right now.
Every time there's it's always the same story over and over again. I think whenever there's bargaining discussions going on, it's never amicable. It's always, because that's the nature of the beast. There's going to be us and them, we and me. Them gotta go. They gotta listen to what we want. Good guy, bad guy, all those stupid cliches, they all enter into this. But I think the most salient thing that you can say about bargaining, get it over with, get it done. Don't endanger the season as it's been endangered and pillaged the past few years.
This is what the CFLPA is always going to be there. The one thing that the CFL can always use over the CFLPA, how many players can afford to not play? Aren't many. They will use that against the CFLPA in bargaining. And it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the reality of why the CFLPA has had to maybe take concessions every time they bargain.
It's ironic because when you think about it, with how much players get paid, you know what I mean? Like, they don't get paid a lot of money by sports standards, at the very least, anyway. I mean, by, ordinary working stiffs, yeah, they make good money because in 6 months they make $50,000 a year. There aren't many working stiffs that make, $50,000 in 6 months, right? So yeah, so it's a lot of money in that situation, but in the sporting world, it isn't that much. But the other thing that, well, what do you think? Is it a lot of money?
It depends on which player and what position, right? When it's starting out, no, you don't make that much money. When you eventually get, it's what they put there, considering the short life expectancy of their careers and how much they can maximize from that career. It's not really that much. But it's a little. I mean, if you get to that point where you're in the CFL long enough, you will make a decent living off of it. You can. It's not great at the start. We've kind of admitted to that, I think, at certain points. But yeah, no, I would say it could be better. And I think that's something that the CFLPA does recognize.
What is the CFLPA there to do? What do they do? What is their job? They're there to, I think, primarily, if we're to prioritize, and you could probably put all three at the same level. It's workplace safety should be up there, right? Financial remuneration, how much you earn, should be up there, and not. I'm going to use the term lifestyle, right, of a football player. What is the lifestyle of a CFL player? Those three things to me should be the priority. In other words, what's life like as a CFL player? How much do I earn? And am I taken care of in regards to my long-term health? I don't know. Is there something else that you would add as a priority?
Well,
I mean, independence as like an independent contractor, like they are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, portability, being able to get around unencumbered, free agency is something they have to negotiate. It's one of the first things to go, right?
Yeah, well, the first thing is there ways for me to maximize what I earn or find ways to make more outside of what I'm being paid by the league? If the CFL players deem that what they get paid by the league isn't sufficient enough, what are other ways that they can maximize their earnings? That's where the CFLPA comes in too, because teams aren't, in most cases, teams aren't offering,
Jerseys.
yeah, jerseys, revenue sharing, you know, events, talking engagements. We've seen them do. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a couple of other ones here. Yeah, merchandise is a big one. Now a lot of them are getting into some of the more modern things like gambling, and you see the there was
How does the CFLPA profit from gambling? What's their cut? Do they get a cut?
yeah
This agreement that the Canadian Football League has, right?
the
How
new
do the
the new venture that they're doing with
Yeah,
Genius. How does the
how do the
CFLPA,
players get their cut? Do they get a cut?
should they get a cut? That's probably another thing
Do
to say.
they get a cut of the gate? Should they get a cut of the gate? Do they get a cut of the TV revenue? Should they continue to get a cut of the TV revenue? Sorry. All these things are the things that they negotiate, and some of it's new, the gambling, the TV, and the gate. Right now the gate is suffering everywhere.
Yeah.
So sharing in that, you know, is not enough because you're going backwards. And as a league, they're going backwards financially.
This is why the players want to be more involved in how the league operates. If the league is struggling to bring in at the gate, what can the players do to help the league profit, or not even profit, to try to get closer to even?
We've heard players talk about how the league should be run. There's that.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, they've those who, here's the thing, and that, it's a lot easy to be on the outside and say, oh, if the CF, we could help the CFL do this and that. And part of me always thinks, well, don't you think the CFL has maybe already thought about how they could do this and that and make money through they've probably thought about it, and there's probably challenges that come with that.
Do you think? Do you think that the players could make a contribution in ensuring and in helping, I should say, not ensuring, in helping to extend revenues? Is there a part they can play in partnership with ownership, or is the problem, which every year is the same thing, where this open book policy doesn't exist with the Canadian Football League, right? Where I shouldn't say that. There's information that isn't shared with the CFLPA, right? And that lack of sharing information um, allows the imagination of the CFLPA to run wild, wondering, how much money are we missing out on?
Yeah. Well, this is where I think like they try with the CFLPA with new getting more of the current players involved with it, because if you're not involved, I always say, if you're not involved with something or directly involved with something, giving your time to it, I wouldn't complain about the results, because unless you're trying to be a part of the solution, you're not going to get the results you want, right? I think the CFLPA right now, they recognize more than ever that they need to try to find a way to be a bigger partner. But what does being a bigger partner mean, right? That's always something I've always wondered, is what can the players in the offer to the CFL to make the CFL say, "Oh, yeah, let's give that a shot." I don't really know what it is really,
I,
and I think
I,
that's something that both sides are trying to figure out.
I just think that players deserve a lot more than they get. I think those of us who aren't in ownership can agree with that. But the other thing is that what we can agree on as well is that the Canadian Football League isn't as profitable as it needs to be.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we think the CFL has done everything possible to make money, I would say that that's very short sighted because there are definitely a lot of ways the CFL can make more money. Um, but the problem is that there's an investment that needs to be made.
And
Right?
then
And
that's
they don't
when
want to keep throwing money at a problem because they don't think it's going to be worth the return because there hasn't been a return. But if you don't try anything, if you just stick to the same formula, you're going to expect the same result.
the problem I have, David, the problem I have now within this time frame that we're in, the problem that I have is that they're not running. It's like um, it's like you've got a flat tire,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now you need to get somewhere to put the air in the tire to replace the tire. You're not there. So whether you like it or not, you've got to take care how you drive the vehicle to wherever it is that you need to get air in the tire or whoever you need to call and how long it takes that person to come and help you. The Canadian Football League is in that moment where the car is broken down. Something's wrong with the car. It needs to be looked at, but it can't get you to the next, it can't move the way it did before because it's in this situation, which is post pandemic financial restraints because of the pandemic. Money is a little tighter. And so now they have to fix that problem first. The problem being the vehicle has to start moving. So how do you get it to move? Well, you put the spare on. You take the time to put the spare on. Now you're running on the spare. Until they can get the business of the Canadian Football League running at its potential, not like right now, it's not running at its potential. Why isn't it running at its potential? Because it's not running as it was before. We're starting over. So there's that ramp up period. I'm struggling with this, but I'm trying my best. We're in a ramp up period with the Canadian Football League. And that ramp up period doesn't draw as much attention as it should, doesn't make as much money at this moment as it should. So they got to get to the other side. They got to get to the station. They got to get air in the tire. They got to pump air in the tire so they can drive down the road at the speed that they're accustomed to. Right now, they're just running on a flat tire. To answer your question or to keep on topic, the Canadian Football League Players Association can come up with the most brilliant ideas ever had right now. The problem is the league is not functioning normally at this point. They're in the position of rehiring people within the head office. The the teams, I assume, they're okay. They as well, didn't necessarily keep everybody on during the pandemic that was there. They might be restocking the staff. So everything that's happening in the Canadian Football League right now is a house. It's a shell of its previous self until they fill until they until they reinitiate the organizations that make up the Canadian Football League in the way that they were before the pandemic. They can't move forward at the speed that we hope that they can. So there's this period of time where they have to redouble their efforts to run as they did before. And then we know the last thing I'm going to say is things weren't getting better before the pandemic. There were concerns popping up with the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, like here's the thing. Before it wasn't like they went into the pandemic in the best of shape. They
Uh,
were that was I think that's something that needs to be recognized here. It's not like this the pandemic.
how does that affect the players? So we stay on topic,
Yeah.
right? The player. How does that affect the players?
Well, the way it affects the players is that there were issues that even the players probably that players recognized and were trying to bring up, but they could never get an answer because again, if you want to make a significant change in the CFL and how the CFL operates, you have to be willing to bite the bullet. I think if you're the players, you have to finally say, you know what? we're not going to put up with it anymore. We're not just going to stand by and say, all right, we have these issues that we want to deal with and head on. Let's deal with it. And the CFL is just like, okay, well, we're just not going to play because we're fine. The CFL has already shown that it's fine with stepping aside for a season. I think that's what the pandemic should also show the players. The league is willing to eat a season to maintain what they believe, is almost to keep things the way they want to keep it. They
I get
want
it,
to.
David. They be on a diet, but you got to eat. You can't be on. A diet means eating less, not stop eating. Like you can't stop eating, and the league can't stop. They've got to move forward. They've got to get some stuff done. The Players Association is only half the problem, right? The other half of the problem are the fans.
Yeah, what are you doing to bring in new fans?
And
What
what
do
are
you?
you doing to make the fans that were there before want to come back?
Well, that's the first. Yeah, I would say
You
that's
know,
it's easy to get those who were here before to come to get them back if you can. But yeah, what have they
it's
done?
still a job right now.
Oh, I'm hearing how fans have talked about the way that they want to help the CFL, but it's not been easy.
Well, the stuff that's come out of the CFL, if the biggest voice, the Canadian Football League, and this is a problem in my mind. Three Down Nation is a great organization. They do great articles. They're a constant talking about the Canadian Football League, talking about the Canadian Football League, whether it's the NFL, whether it's other teams with the spin on the Canadian Football League, whether it's gambling, whether it's ideas that are imaginary or real. The reason I'm saying Three Down Nation is because we're not hearing anything really of value in front of, like, we're not seeing the Canadian Football League talk to the fans and to the media up front. They're not in front of things. They're it's everything's a reaction to what is being said privately or not. We don't know, right? For example, 4 downs instead of 3 downs. Uh, Gambling, we know that was a question, and now we know it's a reality. We found out at the Grey Cup it was a reality. And how are the teams going to raise interest in the game? We heard about it. They didn't get in front of it, that they were talking about rule changes. They didn't, we hear about it in the media first, then the CFL tells us about it. I don't understand why they can't be in front of stuff. And it gives fans the wrong impression, I think, that the league is reacting to what's going on around them as opposed to being at the table, talking about it, and being a leader, in what's going on.
That's actually a very good point because you know what, Three Down Nation, I'll give them this. They they do a great job of bringing up the issues in the CFL because they have look. They want to cover the league. They provide coverage to the league, but they don't have a skin in the game, right? They don't have any controlling interest, and they're not a partner. They're not a sponsor. So they're probably this is I think if you're a CFL fan, this is great because they're not going to hold back on the issues. But yeah, when you're seeing these things come to light and the CFL is reacting, the best case was the Canadian players one. When a memo came out and saying the league had proposed eliminating the Canadian ratios and limiting the maximum number of Canadian CFL players they want, only then for the CFL themselves to have to put out a statement saying that they value the Canadian players in the league. There's nothing more important than Canadian players. So why would you put in your proposal for the CBA to lessen the ratio, essentially hurting the chances of having more Canadian players on the team, only to then a few hours later having to put out what I call a damage control PR statement. That is exactly, Frank, what you're trying to say there.
That's
In that,
exactly what I'm saying. And that's a perfect example is they're saying, no, we love our Canadian players. Oh, by the way, we're thinking of lessening how many we have. Um,
By the
it
way,
it
there's two. They had two statements on within the same day.
Tell
The
us,
first,
in your own words, tell us the 2
well, I
statements
have
so
them right in
bring the
front of me.
viewers.
All it just is a picture, and it says Canadian players are the lifeblood of the CFL game, along with the veteran American players who make a career here. That
Right.
will not change. So that's the first one.
So
And
so okay, go ahead, go ahead.
then not too long later, we are deeply committed to a long-term mutual beneficial partnership with our players. That was true when this bargaining process started, and will be true when we reach a collective agreement and beyond.
Okay. So both those things are tied. What they're saying is we love and respect our Canadian players and our American players that are playing in our league. So they're speaking to the CFLPA is what they're doing. By saying
Mhm.
that, they're saying to the CFLPA, we love you guys. We think you guys are awesome and you're a part of our environment. You're who we want to be in partnership with, and we respect and appreciate your part in the Canadian Football League. The problem I have with that statement is that they also said they were, like you said, and then part of the bargaining that comes out, is it true? And again, is it true that they want to minimize the amount of Canadians that are in the Canadian Football League? Yes or no? You know, uh, uh, there's two things that make the Canadian Football League the Canadian Football League. Two things, other than the teams are in Canada. There's two things. The players are Canadian and they play three downs. And what we're hearing before the season starts and the conversations are, should we have three downs and should we have Canadians? I, I, I mean, I want to pull my hair out when I hear these conversations because, you know, um, I put it out there sometimes because I wonder, you know, where. Like a lot of times I don't ask a question when I go on Facebook because I'm doing my own little survey. I'm going, so what do you think of three downs as opposed to four downs? Well, most people say no, three downs it is. Forget the four downs. I don't know if that's because people who believe four downs should be tried are afraid to say it publicly. I mean, is there that? Is that an issue? That people don't want to admit they want to do four downs that are Canadian Football League fans?
I think there's probably some that wouldn't mind the CFL to try it.
And they might not say it out loud because,
They will get the
roasted.
barrage of people that will come after them if they actually speak what they actually think. Um, Look, I have no problem with the CFL considering going to four downs because look, as much as three downs is a part of the Canadian game, um, three to four downs, that's not a hill I'm willing to die on. But you're calling yourself the CFL, the Canadian Football League, and any attempt to make it tougher on Canadian players to get into this league, you're then you're going to be like every other football league out there, in my opinion, because what identity are you going to have in this country? You know, there's a reason why there's people who like the Canadian Football League. They love the fact that there are Canadians who can make a living playing football. I don't know if you've noticed, there we're seeing some getting opportunities in the NFL, but it's not like we're getting a massive wave like
No,
any
it's
other.
every year a half dozen that are considered
Right.
new prospects, right? They get drafted.
It's getting better. It is getting better
Absolutely.
for them, but it's not to the point where I'm saying, "Oh, we're seeing a boom in Canadian talent in the NFL. The CFL should be in trouble." No, there's quite a few CFL players that don't even get a chance to go to the NFL or even a look in the NFL that want to play
You
football, and
you
the
you want me
CFL.
to make a comparison? Want me
Right.
to make a comparison for you? Help people, for those of you that love the CFL, and let's say you love hockey too. Do you know how many Danish players there are in the National Hockey League? There's
That's
that many Canadians in the National Football League when you consider how many players there are in the NFL. You understand what I'm saying? Like, there's like 3 or 4 Danes in the NHL. Well, multiply that times about 4 times as many players than there are. Like there's 60, 70 players, on a NFL players that, you know, possible players that'll play for the team. So, I mean, the roster is what, 50, something like that in the NFL. It's more than the Canadian Football League, you know,
Yeah, this is the thing. If there
times
was another,
32 teams.
Canadians wouldn't be fighting this as much if there was another option for them. We don't know if what the XFL holds for Canadians. I mean, the USFL probably not as well. Like
There's
I
another problem too when it comes to being Canadian is that I hate to say it, but there's going to be discrimination because there is discrimination within the Canadian Football League. It's not overt. It's even acceptable in the Canadian Football League. The whole issue in the Canadian Football League is that the coaches, for the most part, are all American. And when it comes to quarterbacks, we know this to be true. We've heard the conversations. We know it to be factual that if you're a coach in the Canadian Football League and you're American, you're going to trust an American quarterback who understands what you're trying to do, and a quarterback, not that I'm not talking about Canadian quarterbacks that come out of the college, US college. I'm talking about quarterbacks that come from elsewhere. They don't get a fair shot, and they're not going to get a fair shot. That's just the way it is.
the thing is also, and this,
Imagine in a different league.
yeah, no,
Imagine in a
exactly,
different league.
no,
No, we're not.
exactly, and
To answer your question anyway.
yeah, I totally get where the players at with this. Like, it's frustrating because what has the CFL done to really explain or really say we value the Canadians in this league? Has, like, other
All
than putting out a
perception.
statement,
It's all perception.
right? This is the one. So if we're talking about the issues with everything that the CFL has discussed over this offseason, it started at the Grey Cup. Let's not forget, four downs was brought up.
Yeah, yeah,
Grey Cup week,
absolutely.
your biggest showcase of the year, and they were talking about four downs. Um, but I still think everything that's gone on, the Canadian Football League's stance should have always been, what are we doing to ensure the sustainability of this league in this country? And a big part of that is, not only do we need to get people excited to in the stands, you need the town pool that's coming to your league to be thriving. And that's where I think the issue has also become is, if you're not getting the best, if you're not putting the investment to get the best possible athletes from the country, well, of course you're not going to want to, you're going to say, maybe we need to look at other places. Well, if you're not putting the investment in your own backyard, you're not going to get much. This is what continues from what I said in the beginning. The CFL is not willing to put the money in improving the league itself. You're going to get the same results, and it's going to be the same frustrations from everybody involved.
I'm concerned because when it comes to the Canadian Football League, um, what happens if it's unsuccessful? If things become desperate where teams, more than two teams, more than three teams, more than four teams start to suffer financially where they're not making enough money, where the fans aren't showing up at the stadium enough. Like, show up, yes, not enough. Hopefully not. Is the Canadian Football League, and are they concerned or interested? I think the one thing that it's hiding in plain sight, the talk with the XFL, the talk about four downs, the talk about we don't need Canadians. All this talk points to something, and what it points to in my mind, David, it points to a league that isn't just Canadian. That's what it points to for me. That when we hear this kind of stuff, I can see, rightly or wrongly, people can hate me for saying it, but I can see not the CFL folding, but a hybrid of what we saw a few years ago, many years ago, where American teams came in. Whereas what might happen is the Canadian Football League might join with another league and or decide that the Canadian Football League just isn't working, because if it isn't working and it not making money, the people that run football in Canada, all of them independent companies, if you will, the Calgary Stampeders, the Toronto Argonauts, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, the Ottawa Red Blacks, list all the names of the teams. These are independent companies that may do something crazy. Like some of them might splinter off to play in another league. We've heard about four downs. We've heard that there's a problem enough that somebody, for example, we saw it was admitted. Calgary, the general manager said, "Yeah, it was just something I wanted to look into because they're desperate to make change that'll improve the game for them, which is people coming to watch the game live. And the more people that come to watch them live, the more people there are out there that want to watch it on TV, right? There's a direct relationship that, a certain amount of people come to the stadium, willing to come to the stadium. That means that relates to how many people are willing to sit at home and watch the games.
Yeah, and what are you doing to get people to also watch the game? I working in this industry, I can tell you right now, there are quite a few people that do not own a television box. What I mean by a television box, Rogers Cable, Bell Fibe, Cogeco in some places, Shaw and others,
Or satellites.
or satellite. That's not everybody. Not every young people have had to make concessions, and one of those concessions is I'm not going to pay for cable, but I will pay for a streaming service that will allow me to watch games.
Or
So
I'll figure out a way to watch the game,
yeah,
right?
they might consider one with I mean, TSN does have a streaming service, so it's not like there isn't an option. But what has the CFL done to market to those younger people? What has the CFL done to, everyone's on their phones. Everybody's consuming information through social media, through applications. What has the CFL done to get to that area? Like, as much as we want to talk about rules and talk about players, what's been the approach from the CFL in that regard?
Yeah, but David, that stuff is supplemental. And by that I mean, when the NFL talks about streaming, it's supplemental to what the major income, which is television, Major League
Oh, yeah.
Baseball, the NBA, even the National Hockey League, that stuff is supplemental. Uh, I think it speaks to what you're saying, speaks to the fact that the CFL has to spread itself out. It has to do better in regards to what you're talking about. I agree 100%. But they do have to also improve the desire of people to watch on normal television, on regular television too. I mean, I know what you're saying. They haven't done any. They're not. The supplemental stuff. It's like the gambling, right? They've entered into the gambling finally.
Oh, yeah. Wait until look, gambling can be profitable to a league like the CFL, but don't kid you if it's gonna be it's not gonna be perfect. You know, CFL fans might think, "Oh, I can make a lot of money off of gambling on the
Well,
CFL."
it's about having fun. Winning money is fun. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, I have had a lot of fun when I've won. I've also realized it is hard to do it on a consistent basis. It takes a lot of
The Canadian Football League um, and gambling. What makes the Canadian Football League, I'll ask you, what makes the Canadian Football League a good candidate for gambling? What does it offer in your mind as someone who likes to have fun gambling?
so football as a sport offers the value it offers is that you can go through many outcomes in a game without actually betting on the result of the game.
Okay.
Okay. And other leagues are getting better at this too. Other sports are getting better at this too. But as a league, as a sport, football has, and it's easy to do your research for once a week, have it all set up. Hockey, baseball, basketball, it's multiple nights. It's a little harder to keep. For football, you're looking at all this information to put it on a one weekend slate of games. It's a little easier in that regard, and you're not watching a million games at once. There's one game you're watching. You're keeping an eye on that game, and you can focus on that one game too. That's where the CFL benefits. There might not be a big volume, but it's a concentrated volume. Everybody will be watching that one game that's gambling. They're not flipping back and forth between games in the CFL. And there's a lot of different if you have the proper research out there for people to look at trends are the biggest thing in gambling. What are the trends telling me to put my money on? Are they telling me that certain players perform to a certain expectation every week? Is a quarterback throwing over 30 passes on a regular basis? Is that something I can bet on? There's trends in football that are a lot more sustainable to bet on than in any other sport. One that's actually become a lot popular in hockey is shot totals. How many shots will Austin Matthews have in a game? And they look at the trends of what he's done against certain teams over a certain period, and it's that information that they crave. The CFL itself has to do a better job of displaying those stats so that people can feel more confident in the bet. And that's all going to be, I think, a big approach for the CFL when it comes to betting. And but yeah, no, as a league and as a sport, football has the allure of just how the game is played and all the different outcomes that you can look to, whether live in game before the game starts, that you can look to try to make some money off of.
So lots of opportunities for laying down a bet, making a prediction, and getting a return on a successful prediction.
Mhm.
Um, I guess for me, um, the Canadian Football League has done it the best way they can. I think getting in a partnership with somebody that does it already, that maybe they can template this situation, because the CFL doesn't have the manpower to do this on their own. They have to get into a partnership. So now the thing of it is, for those of you that think there isn't any interest in gambling in the Canadian Football League, I get why you're wondering about that, but I will also remind you that there are some 50-50 draws that have happened in some Western teams for a $500,000, and that's just a 50-50 draw. So there's an interest in places where someone is willing to put a couple of ducats down in the hopes of getting a decent return for that investment, right? So there's a possibility, and it's a question of how they find, and this is the most important thing. The league is trying to find customers to show up at the games. The league is trying to find customers to watch their games on TV. And now this new group of people they're looking for, people that are willing to gamble. Those people that are willing to gamble, I think we've said this and everybody knows that those are also the people that might watch on TV and or go to the game.
Yeah, for sure. This is the other thing too with gambling. You can provide promotions and offers, right? I know a friend who was, before gambling was really prevalent in Canada. There were, I think it was DraftKings was one of them.
Hmm.
If you predicted certain outcomes on a night, you got to win free tickets to go and watch the Leafs.
Right on.
I don't know if anyone's realized this. The Leafs are very expensive to go watch a hockey game. So
Absolutely.
that's like almost like winning the lottery in some cases. Um, but if you're the CFL, this is you partner with these companies to offer take you want to get people's butts in the seats, and then they make their determination on whether they want to continue going to the games. And yeah, so there's partnerships. There's also um if you want to get yourself into these different spaces on the social media aspect and digital landscapes, the gambling companies can actually do the work for you. If you give them the information they need, the access that they need, they'll if there's what because look, what the gambling companies are trying to gambling sport books are trying to do, they're trying to get bets coming in. So if they got an avenue where they can not gonna say exploit, but when they where they can increase the market and how many people are placing down bets and thinking that they're doing confidently, guess what? They are going to the CFL can profit and benefit from that.
Absolutely. You used a very important word, um, one that concerns me when it comes to gambling. You use the word exploit. Um, take a turn here. We've got 20 minutes left in the show. Well, 15 really. Um, Here's if I can take a turn. I've come to the grim realization that in fact gambling is a form of exploitation. You know, putting people in the position of spending money, whether they have it or not. Right? I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Um, I look at I look at gambling the same way I look at cigarettes and alcohol. And both those things, like gambling right now, were very tied to the sport. You know, whether it be cigarette companies were promoting, you may be too young to remember this, but maybe not. But they basically Demorier was the Canadian Open. The Players Invitational was tennis. These are all cigarette companies, and then you have alcohol that advertised. The government deemed it a bad idea to advertise freely alcohol and cigarettes, so they outlawed it. You couldn't do that on television anymore. My prediction is that's going to happen with gambling as well. I'm just wondering how quick. I'm not saying that you can't gamble the same way I'm not saying you can't drink the same way I'm saying you can't smoke. It's your choice. It's your decision. But when it comes to sports, there isn't just one segment of society that watches sports. Children, adults, men, women, we all watch sports and we all watch TV and all that stuff. So they deemed it a bad idea to have cigarettes advertising or central to sporting events and alcohol. I think gambling is the same problem. When they come to realize it, they're going to come for that. And gambling is going to have to be just like cigarettes and alcohol. It's there, it's on the table when people are watching the game, the alcohol. When they're outside or whatever, if that's the way they feel, or they smoke in the house, they can smoke while they're watching the game. But there won't be an upfront advertising, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion. This business of showing how to gamble in the middle of a game, I'm totally against it. I just realized it's not a great idea because I don't want to see 6-year-old children learning about gambling. They're not old enough to handle it yet. And this is a concern I have. And the Canadian Football League is not going to be that attached to it. It's not going to be that difficult for it to not, be involved that way. Um, the Canadian Football League had a long history with alcohol and with cigarettes, a long history, but it stopped. And I think gambling is an exploitation opportunity like alcohol and like cigarettes. And I'm sorry if I'm raining on people's parade who like to gamble, and that's not my point. My point is that gambling isn't for everyone, and therefore it shouldn't be available to everyone, and it should not be something that children have a chance to learn about when they're just children.
Oh, those are all very valid points, especially the children part. This is where I have the issue with gambling being central on a lot of now broadcasts, where you see it in ends and intermissions and stuff, because you're not going to have. I get that now it's legalized, that there's now the government is saying that there is, the moral ground of it is different than before, but the results still are troubling because I have seen cases in where people have. I mean, I've seen videos of people losing their minds because they didn't get their 6 leg parlay to cash. There's a reality to gambling that needs to be realized here.
There's
In that,
a side to it
yeah,
that certain people need to be sheltered from it. young people for a time
Mhm.
and people with a problem forever.
I'll tell you this. In order to get into first off, to even get yourself into a position to gamble, there's steps you have to take. One main one being you need to have a driver's license.
Ah,
You have to upload your identification so that the company knows you're actually a person. So that's the
right.
first thing. So at
Well, you're
least
good for your money too, right?
so that's the other thing. I can't just put a wager. Some betting sites, you can't just put your credit card. You can't just they're not just there's safeguards too. I've put a limit on what I can put into my betting account.
Mhm.
You know, once I've reached my limit, that's it. I can't put any more.
Right.
That's something gambling companies have to do, but it's something I think that needs to be. I think this is where the message has gone away. You have to bet within your means. Okay.
Right.
Um, and the companies and those who are promoting gambling need to also make that fact very known that not only do you need to do it, but there are people doing it, but it needs to be more prevalent in all the messaging and things like that. But yeah, I still think that you can't you there's nothing stopping kids from seeing gambling things because everyone's got access to it on their phones and seeing the messaging out there. But yeah, you can definitely limit the exposure as well, just like you do with alcohol.
Let,
Just
let
like
me let me make something clear. I don't gamble. I don't know anything about it. I'm learning from you, and I'm not going to sit here and say you're not allowed to do it because I don't like it. That's not my.
yeah,
That's not what I'm here to say or do. Again, I just don't like the idea that the idea of gambling is that accessible everywhere. It's just like alcohol is not accessible everywhere. That's my only thing. Cigarettes are not accessible everywhere. I mean, we go into a store, they hide the fact that cigarettes are there, right? You're not allowed to show them in plain sight. There's a reason for that. It's about addiction, alcohol addiction, cigarette addiction, and I hate to say it, there's a thing called gambling addiction too.
mhm.
So, addictive things need to be kept away from people who might otherwise not be it might not be a problem for them. So, and children are one of them. And broadcasting gambling on regular TV during a sporting event that young children are watching, I think is a place it shouldn't be. But, again, this is not about me saying that's the way it should be. I'm trying to learn here. I'm concerned, and
It's a concern. No, it's a legitimate
I'm
concern.
just voicing a concern that I also saw somebody post that now they don't wanna watch sports because with their child because now they have this gambling stuff, and this parent doesn't want their kid watching how to gamble during the game because in a way, they look at gambling like they probably look at cigarettes and alcohol. It's the same kettle of fish, although they're all different, but they have a common thread, addiction. And our lives are complicated enough and tough enough with addictions finding us in strange places and quiet places and corners of our lives that if they're up front, that's to me that's scary, and I don't want to be big brother. So please don't think I'm demanding that rules change and that this not happen. I'm just asking a question, and I'm concerned on behalf of other parents and people who understand the weaknesses that some people have, that they need to be protected from it, but they don't need to be an open target either.
Yeah, this is where I think maybe broadcast companies, need to do a separate broadcast for gambling. So if you wanna learn more about the gambling for the in game and the analysis on it, this is and look, the companies have multiple channels. They have the ability to go to do that. They have the ability to control that. They
There's
definitely
gonna
do.
be warnings. Eventually, there's going to be warnings that gambling's not good for everyone. You're about to watch something, and that's gonna happen. This is a prediction on my part using my logic, which might be crazy, might be off the wall, but I'm just putting it out there.
I definitely do think that the league, not just the league, I think these company this is all government. The government has to be the one that puts the control on it too.
Well, the government's making it legal because of the same reason that this happened with alcohol. When it was illegal, people found alcohol, and then the government said, "Okay, you can drink." So same thing happened with marijuana, right? It it's not like the government invented it. It was out there already. So now they're just helping to manage its existence and profiting from it. The government too is it's we're not just talking about business here. We're talking about governments are profiting from this as well. They're not making it legal out of the generosity of thought or kindness to gamblers. It's a business for them. The lottery commission makes money.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing, right? There's got to be this, but this is why this was always the sell for the sports books to the government. You know how much money you can make if you guys allow gambling? There, the states for the longest time, the United States really put a harsh control on gambling. Then it started to loosen, and it's ballooning now. And you're seeing the profit that wait until you hear how much the Ontario government's going to profit. And this, I'll just say this so about gambling in Canada or in Ontario specifically, it's not the same as it is in the States. There's limitations because of the Ontario rules that have been put in place, and I've
Mhm.
actually have heard from some people who are upset with that and how the Ontario government has allowed gambling but has not followed, how it's really supposed to be done. I'm like, well, at least you get to do part of what you wanted. But I do think there's a
Are
responsibility.
they casting a blind eye to what's going on, or they're just pretending they're allowing gambling? I'm trying to understand what you just said.
No, so what it is that there's certain things you can do in the states in terms of what you can place wagers on, how much, and there's
We're limited
controls.
here. You're saying we're
There's
limited here.
limits here in Ontario based on the legislation that was put out and what the rules were set. So, but at the same time, the concerns that you have are still prevalent. Kids are seeing it. Unfortunately, nowadays, because of technology, and every kid have a lot of kids who, I mean, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 16. 16. A lot of kids, well, kids half my age have a cell phone. They
Right.
have access to it. Problem is also, I mean, look, the same parents who are concerned about gambling too have to put those parental controls on what their kids are
Yeah,
putting in
but
as well.
again, I repeat, cigarettes in stores are hidden.
Hmm.
I'm
You
just
can,
saying.
you can hide those things on you can't on the broadcast, but you can in other spaces.
Well, we'll see. I think it's going to become something that'll be. Mark my words. I consider gambling no different than alcohol and cigarettes. It's an addiction problem. It's is it a health concern to the extent that alcohol is or cigarettes are? We have a great hockey player who died of throat cancer, Guy Lafleur, from cigarettes. You know, um, a superstar, but he smoked, and it helped take his life away. I mean, it's the reality. We're not here to be. This is not about being Big Brother. Just a simple fact that things aren't good for you and aren't good for people. And what we're worried about, and I think we should worry about, are children, young people who are impressionable. And impressionable and having gambling on a hockey game and making it sound like fun, uh, the definition of a problem in the making for me, in my mind. Rightly or wrongly, it's just an opinion I have. And again, I don't make the rules. It's just an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that's going to be, they're going to have to continue to make adjustments for.
Well, we'll see what happens and what kind of feedback they get, because that's always, the government makes a decision and then there's a reaction and then there's information that comes in and then another reaction, right? So it's a fluid situation, to say the least.
Yes, for sure.
But it's business. It's about making money, and making money makes the world go round. That's an old saying.
For sure.
All right, David, thanks for this, and good luck with the Canadian Football League. Hopefully they can figure out some of the issues we discussed today. We sure would like to see them get in front of stuff more than follow outside concerns.
Yeah, well, hopefully that when we talk next week, things will be. Next week, we're getting close to training camps. Training camp's supposed to open next week. Let's just hope we're
There you
talking
go.
about that and not something else.
Absolutely. Well, for David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. Today at 7 p.m. special edition. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network for CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. Until next time.